In a dystopian alternate America ruled by a totalitarian regime, 50 teenage boys take part in a deadly annual walking contest, forced to maintain a minimum pace or be executed until only one survivor remains. So The Long Walk is the 157th Stephen King adaptation, and what I've noticed is that critics seem to be connecting with this film a lot more than audiences, and I feel like I know why. This movie is exactly what it says it is. It's a long walk, and while that focus leads to some incredible performances, the kind that tends to get critics talking, I feel like this film is missing a lot of what general audiences, myself included, look for in these films. This movie is directed by Francis Lawrence, who is the director of the last 5 Hunger Games movies, and he's currently working on his 6th. So this guy clearly is not a stranger to, dystopian YA stories. But this movie finds a couple ways to separate itself from any sort of Hunger Games comparison. And I feel like the first one, the one I noticed immediately, was just how violent this movie is. I'll be honest, I watch a lot of movies, and when I'm booking these tickets, I don't always check to see what the movie's rated. So I was very surprised when we see our first execution, and it's literally some kid getting his face blown off, and it's like in absolute graphic detail. And the way it was so cold and nonchalant just really showed the setting of this country that just completely removed and forgot the value of life in a way that was just, genuinely uncomfortable to watch. And this is coming from someone who is generally unfazed by violence in movies. So I don't know, maybe I'm getting old or something. Another thing that separates this film is that although the boys, technically are competing against each other, they don't have to physically overpower each other. They just have to keep walking at all costs. So pretty early on, a lot of the boys, they get to know each other, and this is where the film puts about 95% of its energy and its focus. All right, so leading this film, we have David Johnson as Pete McVries and Cooper Hoffman as Ray Garrity, who without a doubt put this movie on their backs. And, more on them in a sec. We also have Mark Hamill as the Major, the only, figurehead we see from this dystopian regime. We also have Garrett Werning, Tut Nyot, Bang Wang, Jordan Gonzalez, and Charlie Plummer as some of the boys. And then we have Judy Greer in a small but absolutely heart-wrenching part as Ray's mother. Like I and many others have said at this point, Johnson and Hoffman knock it out of the park with their performances. I always feel like Hoffman brings this intangible, authentic humanity to the roles that he plays, and Ray Garrity's no different. And despite him being one of the kindest guys on the walk, he's the first to speak up in the group, and bring up the twisted nature of the long walk. And he has these moments where we see his true disdain for this dystopian society. David Johnson's Pete McVries is also one of the best examples of smiling through the pain that I've ever seen. Pete is an introvert's worst nightmare. He's cracking jokes left and right at legit anybody brave enough to get in range, but the walk is long, and sometimes you see the cracks in his armor. I remember in Alien Romulus, his performance in that was probably the most standout of the whole film for me, and I felt like his face acting was on another level. So when him and Hoffman just team up and pair up in this film, they really are an unstoppable force, even when the not so great script tries to stop them. Pretty much all the boys in this do a fantastic role of just playing their part, whether it be, comedic relief or misunderstood stoic. And so as we get further into the film and, they inevitably start getting picked off, the movie manages to make you feel each death, and it's dark. Now, a character that didn't really land with me, and I think points to, the larger issue of the film, is Mark Hamill as the Major. So the Major is in charge of the long walk and also possibly the US government. I'm not really sure, and it's never really talked about, and we never see really anybody else. And my problem with that is that the Major is a bit of a toxic masculinity cringe fest of a character, and half of his lines are about balls and how only the men with the biggest balls can partake on this walk. And it's just what kind of world puts this guy in charge? And I know I'm making this video from 2025 America, but we know how we got here. This movie gives us less than the absolute bare minimum in terms of world building. And while I feel like that could have been intentional to drive the focus towards the walkers, I think it hurts more than it helps. By the end, I had way too many questions about the world around the walk and the message the film was trying to send, if really any at all. And even if the themes and the characters work, there's just a lingering feeling of what was it all for and what does it all mean? And it ends up feeling that the movie isn't intentionally withholding this information. It just doesn't have anything to say beneath the surface. So in the end, the long walk doesn't really argue with the system. It just stares at the people trapped inside of it. But listen, I like this movie. I just wanted more out of it. And if you saw the movie, let me know, do you agree or am I just needy? Anyway, that's all I got. I'll see you guys in the next review. Peace.